Thank you guys for joining us up here on this panel. I won't make the same mistake again. This time I will let you introduce yourself first. So Jay, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself and a little bit about Advanced Software.
Absolutely. Absolutely honored to be here and excited to be here. I mean, it's been an incredible day, loads of great content. So yeah, I'm Jay. I work for a company called Advanced, where I head up the DevOps function. And part of that responsibility is really around, cost governance, cloud governance, driving, cloud cost management. And I was actually recently thinking about it. I was thinking, at Advanced, it's been almost a decade now since we moved our first product to the cloud. And I was thinking, my gosh, unsurprisingly, managing costs for one application was and is very different from managing it for hundreds, So much has changed, so much has evolved, we've scaled, and as Ravi and the team have just demonstrated, the capabilities, continuing to sort of go on that journey. So yeah, Advanced, they're the third largest software vendor in the UK. They've got a broad range of products from health, legal, education, financial market, but we do some pretty amazing things. That has really big impact. So like our patients are alive because of our systems. Lawyers can do their billing because of our services. We provide social housing to people because of that underpinning IT that we give to our local governments. And students, they're getting graduated every single day, again, because of our services. And the way that we grow at Advanced is really through mergers and acquisitions. So what that means for our cloud estate is that we've got a mixed range of architectures, right? From multiple VMs, containerized solutions, Kubernetes clusters, and a mainframe of serverless architectures, which, when you're trying to manage the cost around that, it becomes difficult. Roughly our cloud estate is about just over 160 AWS accounts, and we've got about 400 subscriptions in Azure across 16 tenant groups.
Wow, absolutely amazing. Andy, if you don't mind giving us a little bit about your role at United.
You bet. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Bloomkamp. I work for a small startup called United Airlines. Actually, we're one of the, depending on what metric you use, we're one of the largest airlines in the world. We fly to every continent except for Antarctica. We'll hopefully knock that off next year. And we are going through kind of a digital transformation there. It started about 5 years ago. So when I say startup, I kind of mean it. We've changed the culture there to get away from legacy and start to look at ways that we can adopt agile principles, and Harness have been a great partner for us. So really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, it's interesting. I think there's a little bit of a kind of an elephant in the room. We've been talking about software delivery lifecycle the entire day. And now we're here talking about cloud cost management. And traditionally, they aren't necessarily thought of in the same space or even in the same light. And I think that's something that we're trying to change. But what is your specific viewpoint on that? Looking at this cloud cost, but really having it be entirely part of the software delivery lifecycle.
Yeah. So traditionally, in big enterprise, we had data centers, and your infrastructure is managed by large teams of storage engineers, VMware engineers and whatnot. And as a dev, you didn't really have to think about this kind of stuff. But as we move into the cloud, literally you could make a small mistake and deploy something that could cost thousands of dollars. So it's really important, I think, that we follow things like AWS's well-architected framework, which puts cost right up front in the initial decisioning that you're making during discovery and framing of your workload. And we've really seen, kind of a shift in mentality by adopting the well-architected framework.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, especially around the frameworks. We talk about secure by design, security first. Well, actually, cost governance and that well-managed cost architectures, they, kind of really need to be at the forefront. I was doing my FinOps certification earlier this year, and actually the first thing that I learned is that we kind of must begin with the end in mind. Right, and embed those FinOps processes, and kind of assess, the different stages of the software delivery lifecycle, I guess just look at your organizational processes, look at your procedures, and think about, well, what needs tweaking at early stages to kind of include some of those fundamental practices. And a lot of that is around driving financial policy into your pipelines.
Well, let me then stick with you, Jay. I think, talking about how you're driving those into the pipelines, how do you actually empower engineers, by making it easier for people to do the right thing and hard for them to do the wrong thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach that we took at Advance is really around building in that automation. Because if you build in the automation and you've got the processes around that, it kind of makes it harder to go wrong. And so one of the examples I've got really is we heavily leverage recommendations in CCM. And so what we did was we basically automated the process of like the pull requests, and what that means is that developers and the DevOps teams, well, actually, they just need to, review the change and then push the change, and we automated the actual process of creating the JIRA tickets. So what happens is, recommendation comes into CCM, the automation basically creates your JIRA ticket, and given the size of our estate, we've got thousands of recommendations and a lot of JIRA boards. So, of course, nobody wants to be manually creating those tickets, right? So that JIRA ticket is automated with all the information that you would want to see or have in there, your team, your epic. We've got the priority that's based on a threshold. If that recommendation value is between $200 and $300, well, set it as a P3. We've got like this custom field which takes the recommendation value and stores that value into that a field called potential identified savings. So all the information's there. It goes into the backlog. The backlogs are ordered by priority. So of course, the P1s with the greatest savings are get picked up. Teams get on, they implement it, great. And then what happens in recommendations is, the JIRA ticket is closed, and you can kind of see the status. You can see it from going from to do, in progress, done. And then you can see that saving and applied savings. And then we've built some really awesome dashboards on top of that, which gives you like really holistic and kind of granular visibility. So we've got like a widget with the potential identified savings, and then you've got like the box with the realized. So as across all of these teams and JIRA boards, the tickets are automatically getting closed and marked as done. Well, great, because that's kind of taking all of the totals of all those fields in that potential identified saving, and it's tallying up, and it's great because it's so dynamic. This is your potential, or this is your realized, and we can see that data by product, by business unit, by division, whatever you want. And so the teams have got that visibility of it. And I just think if you automate that and you've got that commitment into sprint, well, it's actually hard to go wrong.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I think, Andy, I'll take it in that same vein. How can we start, or how can automation and tooling be used really to guide engineers towards those best practices?
Yeah, I think it starts with policies and like infrastructure as code policy, and establishing good reference architectures where the costs are known. If you're adopting those, it makes it a lot easier to partner with your finance teams, so they're aware of where you're going with your spend. Also, when you're looking at infrastructure as code, if you're buying RIs or doing things like monthly savings plan review, you need to know what people are purchasing. So having guidance around, like, you can only purchase these types of instances, and you can make sure that you have the right coverage there. That's
awesome. I think having policy, again, making it easy to do the right thing, hard to do the wrong thing, incentivizes a great behavior. Jay, we talk about incentivizing, and I think it's interesting. What incentives can actually motivate engineers to really consistently make good decisions?
I think a lot of it is about sharing that visibility of when people or our teams are doing good things. Sharing that visibility, making it transparent that, well, this is the amount of savings that we've done. And over the last 18 months or so, myself and my line manager, we've been really making a conscious effort to call out the good work that our teams are doing to, save money and lower the cost on our AR. And my line manager happens to be in the audience, so he can definitely testify to this. But the fact that everybody within our business, or our engineers, knows what it means to be cost optimized, and the fact that that's at the forefront of our engineers, well, that's a good thing. And by us calling this out as good work, well, that almost incentivizes it to a degree. And then, we try to take matters into our own hands a little bit, because what we started to do is have regular sessions with the key stakeholders, so that we can talk about the cost, talk about the governance, share the data, share the good work that our teams are doing. And I think talking about it and sharing it and having that visibility is really important, because we always say, if it's that type of work where if it's invisible, no one's going to do it. So we've got to get it out there, we've got to talk about it, we've got to put it into sprints. And then we regularly sort of fed back the month-on-month savings or the week-on-week savings with our COGS board. And so I think what that really meant is that they kind of, they had the visibility, and they, our teams were getting recognized for the work that they were doing. And our C-suite board sort of almost gave us that internal sponsorship, the dedicated time, the space, the focus to drive some of the work. And like I said, it's like a bit of a feedback circle, because we can then share, well, great, these are the savings we're making. And then I guess it's just, almost anything that's exceptional or extra work, well, we have things like spot awards or advanced value awards, and that's all part of the recognition and incentivizes.
It sounds like you're truly incentivizing the behavior that you want, which I think you can't go wrong with that, right? Genuinely trying to bring that into the engineering teams to make sure they're following the same goals. I think also it sounds like this is something cultural, and I think that's something Andy specifically, how does an organization's culture influence engineering behavior?
Yeah, it's, being in a large enterprise that's been around for a while, it's, we've gone through some culture shifts, and some of them forced on us, through different events throughout history. It's really, it really starts at the leadership level. I think you touched on this, right? Like, you need really strong leaders that back a transformative, mindset. One of the things that we had about 5 years ago, we had our CIO come down and say, hey, we operate in the data centers here, and it's costing us a lot of money, and it's time and effort. And one of the data center partners that we had, we're interested, our lease was coming up. And so we thought, hey, now maybe is the time to start looking at moving some of these workloads. And around that same time, COVID hit, and money for the airline went down to basically flat zero, and we were blowing around $25 million a day. So when that hits, you need to kind of change your mentality a little bit. And one of the things that cloud offers us is the space to do innovative work that we needed to do at the time when we needed to do it at a cost that was, competitive. So it's really like, there's a lot of things that can drive it, but really it starts with the leadership kind of brings that to the table, and then it kind of filters down.
I think I'll stick with you, Andy. How can teams, both technical and business, collaborate more effectively when it comes to
yeah, one of the things we do at United is we marry kind of our managing director roles in the digital technology organization with our managing director roles in the business. So they're lockstep with everything that they're trying to accomplish. Like, one cool thing that we saw back when COVID came, and we were kind of like, oh, and what are we going to do? We knew that we'd be back flying, and we were super excited to get back flying. We didn't want to stop any of the momentum that we had. So one of the things we knew we were going to have to deal with was those little COVID cards. And I hate to bring this up because nobody ever wants to talk about COVID anymore, but it was super interesting because every country had a different card. And we needed to build some sort of OCR mechanism into our mobile app that allowed us to not only, read those, but validate those. And it was important not just to the TSA here, but every other country that we were going to. So we took like this, we called it a scrappy mentality, and we put some, just the core teams together that could get that work done, and we knocked it out of the park. And I was super proud of how that all came together, and knowing that we could do that on the cloud platform was really cool.
That's amazing. Jay, I don't know if you have an opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a really recent example, actually, where we've got cross-cutting, multi-teams working together to deliver a cost-effective solution. So one of our financial products, they're called Advanced Financials, they came to us and they said, we really need to understand our costs better. We need to understand our spend. We need to know what our costs per customer are. So we sat down and we pulled up CCM and we went through it. We said, right, okay, this is your spend. This is this is where you're spending. This is your cost. This is your utilization. And off the back of that, it led to like a session with their principal engineer, their product owner, and their product manager. And we basically said, this is where you're spending your money, and this is where you can spend it better. And there was some aggressive right-sizing and recommendations that they needed to do. They have like a container per customer. They needed to do some smarter scaling on there. But we had a look to see, well, can we apply auto-stopping from CCM better? We need to stop running idle resources and move away from the follow the sun model to auto-stopping. So we looked at some of those sort of suggestions. We looked at their database. 75% of their database was idle. So there was some dramatic changes and architectural changes, but also simpler things like applying some of the auto-stopping on that database to kind of lower the sort of ARR. And what it really led to was, a COGS improvement epic that we'd created with some high-level stories, which just required some investigation around some of these recommendations. What did we need to do to bring the COGS down? How are we going to make it more cost-effective for the customer, make the product more profitable? And we started to see like a real shift in our organizational culture. Because what we had was product driving some of the changes, product driving the P&L of the product. And some of these sort of, the accountability that they were taking and the ownership was just driving really good sort of behavioral decisions across, the engineering teams, the FinOps teams, the DevOps teams. And I guess, I think when you've got product sort of driving that, and they're, again, planning this cost optimization work into sprint, and then they're collaboratively working together across all the team, well, great, because, we've all got one goal, so let's work together and get, it more cost effective for the customer. And so it's just a really recent example that we've literally just been through, and it was really nice to sort of see that cultural shift, and, the outcome is going to be positive.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. How can engineering teams effectively manage budgets and spending? I don't know if you want to kick this one off, Andy, or?
Yeah, by no means would I consider, where we're at in our journey, like to be like FinOps excellence, like we hear a lot. So we kind of knew when we started cloud that we were going to have some leeway on how spend was going for a while. And we knew that there'd be some magic number that eventually we would hit, and being a public company, we'd hit that number, and then here comes everyone from our CFO side of the house to find out, where that money is being spent. So, I would just say, like, first of all, build a strong FinOps team, teach your finance guys, if you're an enterprise, what cloud economics looks like, so that they can speak the language that you speak, show them the tools that you use so that they understand. If you're small, and somebody plays that role, you just kind of have to deal with that, obviously. But I would say, get your finance guys up to speed and knowledgeable on the difference between the old way of thinking and the new.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like managing budgets and forecasting, Advance, they're a multi-product company. So what that means is we have budgets per product. And we always track against these budgets month on month, and then you anticipate growth. But we sort of almost say, well, it's sort of interesting because this is our second year of using CCM, but actually it's our first year where our spend matches the budget. So, that's always indicative.
I think that might deserve an applause. The spend matches the budget.
I mean, like I said, we think it's indicative of good cloud cost governance. We plan to spend this much, and actually we spent this much, and we gave some room for contingency and unforeseen circumstances, of course. But in our quarter one this year, we came in slightly under budget, but we've never had that. We've never got it right. And I think, without CCM, we didn't have the governance really to get those numbers right. But now all of a sudden, we're forecasting, and it's great.
That's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. We talk about how we actually design these for customers, our products. I genuinely think this one actually came from John Bonney, our CFO, because I was the one who used to get the call that our sales engineers were just building massive amounts of hardware and infrastructure. Costs were going through the roof, and I'd get the phone call. And I'm fairly certain this was built so he didn't have to do that anymore. No, I think that's amazing. Jay, how can we enforce these best practices and make sure that they're followed without stifling innovation?
So I think, innovation and cost governance, they don't necessarily have to conflict, right? We want to give our engineers that space to innovate. We want them to try out things, but obviously we need to govern the cost of that. So at Advance, we have a platform, we call it the innovation account, and it's basically a space for them to R&D, it's a place for them to have a play, to innovate, it's a sandpit. And we say, go ahead, try anything, we want you to. But obviously, we're gonna govern that with policies and guardrails, and so, they want to provision a type of resource, great. We're not going to let you provision a really big instance of that because obviously we're going to get a cost spike. So it's just around putting some of those policies in place and governing the environment, governing how long things run for. In fact, we apply the harnesses CCM auto stopping across all of the resources in that account. So what that means is, if there's idle resources for 30 minutes, it automatically gets shut down. As soon as there's some traffic and throughput activity, well, great, provision it back up. We clean and wipe the account every month. And then what happens is we almost take that innovative idea and we transform or turn it into an accepted idea. Now that accepted idea has kind of gone through that cost governance. It's now a well-managed cost architecture. Now we can then put it through our development cycles, and then it's ready for our applications to consume. And so I think the key thing is, allow our engineers, we want people to innovate, but we've got to have a budget for that innovation, and we've got to apply the guardrails and the policies to manage it.
That's amazing. I have a fun story about United, actually. So I got on a flight from San Francisco on a United flight, and I, of course, go to my app and I check to find the best seat right before I'm flying, and I pick one. Of course, it has nobody next to me, so I had a full row to myself. And then lo and behold, someone comes on the plane. He sits actually not next to me, but on the aisle. I was on the window, and this person starts talking. I was like, oh hey, yeah, it looked like this seat was open in between us. I think hopefully we're good. He's like, yeah. He's like, one of the biggest things that I love about the apps at United is that literally up to the moment that gate's closing, I can go switch my seat, I can get all the information, I can pull all of that quickly. What he let me know is that he's the son of an executive at a competitor. And he was flying United because he loves your application so much and how easy it is to use. And I thought that was interesting when it comes to this topic about innovation. That's something I think you guys pride yourself on, but I've seen it in the real world.
Yeah, it's not my product, it's our mobile teams, and they're absolutely amazing. We set money aside to innovate because in the airline industry, everyone has airplanes. They're basically the same airplanes. Inside the airplane looks similar. We can differentiate things like what your seat looks like, what you're served. But really, it's about the customer experience now. And we made a conscious shift 7 or 8 years ago to really focus in on customer service. So we have good leaders that allow us to do that type of innovative work and give us the budgeting to do so. So thank you for saying that.
No, absolutely. People we see, they tend to spend money on 3 things, right? So they spend things on revenue generation, cost containment, or government regulation. And what's interesting is, Andy, what are your thoughts on how to actually even associate that revenue?
Yeah, this is we had this in a steering committee meeting where we presented a bunch of financial data up to our C-suite and executives, and they looked at the data and said, oh great, this is a lot of money you're spending and you've done some cool savings things, but how does this money track back to how we run the airline? So the next thing that we're kind of thinking about is, one, it kind of starts with tagging. You got to tag everything correctly so you know where the money's going and what it's going for. But once you have that in place, you can really start to look at how this affects things like our customer service scoring, how it affects our net promoter scoring, things like that, how it affects our seat fill metrics we call CASM. So you can start to really map that back, and as you move those things percentage points, that's millions of dollars we're talking about. So if we spend $500,000 building something crazy and good that moves that percentage point 1 or 2 spots, it's easy to justify that spend.
So one of the things that you've talked about was kind of cash to seat. For those that don't understand that, can you explain that to the audience?
So in the airlines, the way that we kind of match ourselves up to competitors, there's a bunch of different metrics, and one of them is seat revenue. So it's really about how you're filling airplanes and how many runs you do, if they're empty seats, that there's no money there. So it's really just about filling up airplanes, plain and simple. Yeah.
Awesome. I know we've got a few minutes left, but I think the one thing that was interesting is, why might a company choose to implement Harness's CCM? And I think we'll stick with you, Andy, and then we'll finish with you, Jay, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's funny, when Harness came into United, I was actually working on a competitive product, and it was like, Harness, what is it? What are we doing? And pulled aside and looked, and the first thing that struck me was we're a big EKS shop in AWS, and we turned the thing on, and right away we saw significant savings across our clusters. We were just over provisioned in a ton of different areas, and that was as we're negotiating with you guys, are we going to save money just by seeing this type of insight? It was a pretty easy thing to do. The other thing I'll just say too is we're striving to be to change the culture and be, more startup-like. And I think spending time with you guys and understanding how you guys run the business has really been influential to me and others that work with you really closely. Your team's amazing. So, hats off, and I'm really jealous about how you guys run your stuff.
I think that's worth a little bit of applause, that team. Well, Jay, again, I'll leave the same question to you. Why would someone choose to implement Harness's CCM?
I think the reality of it is what we implemented ultimately meant we saved money. So on our millions of dollars of spend, in our first year of using CCM, we had a 31% cloud spend reduction.
Hold on. 31% first year out? That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. What that really meant is that, our products are now more profitable, they're more cost effective for our customer, and actually we've got more money to spend on innovation. And And it wasn't necessarily one feature of CCM. It's sort of a combination of lots of the features, and just starting to get sort of hands-on with it. So I guess with the help of the Harness Intelligent Cloud Auto Stopping, it's that automatic and dynamic stopping of resources. I mentioned it earlier, moving from follow the sun model to auto stopping was game changing, because you're sort of automatically stopping the resources when they're not running. Great, bringing them back up when they are. It's just such a simple yet beautiful process.
So you actually had a follow the sun model before you even used Harness. So you were already doing massive amounts of saving with that, and you still were able to save 31%?
Absolutely, because I think that the thing is, when you've got, we look at our development environments, and in the day, they're running, and they're static schedules, but ultimately they're not necessarily being used all the time. So by just implementing the timeframes and the thresholds, it really does lead to that extra, greater savings. Which is great. We heavily leverage recommendations. I talked about the automation. This one's probably the most prudent for me, because I saw so much savings in it. But it's the automation around it, and I think it's just no more over provision cloud resource, right? With predictive right sizing. It's been that element's been great, but it's really it's about that controlled cloud spend with good governance. The governance as code approach, it really includes real-time enforcement and auto remediation, and some of the things that we've seen, like right sizing for databases, like it's great. Some of the policies, the governance policies that we've applied, some are notifications, but some are policies that we enforce. Not this one, but delete databases that are unused, for example. Delete unused DB volumes, or archive your snapshots, whatever it may be. But automating that process, and again, putting that into Sprint and notifying our teams has been, again, really great. That governance as code, where you can kind of define your policies, really sort of makes a huge difference. And I think with the governance and also some of the dashboards, what we were able to do is actually increase our modernization. So the data that we got helped us make some right decisions. So we said, right, okay, let's look at it. And so we moved to the latest generation instant types. In fact, 90% of our cloud estate is now on the latest Graviton. And that we were able to do that by just visualizing and seeing the data. And then we, off the back of that, started to put service control policies and guardrails to say, okay, we're on the latest Graviton. Let's make sure we're not now re-provisioning those older instance generation types. We did something similar for like volumes, migrating from GP2 to GP3. All of these things, they all add up, and it's just that visibility, the granular cost visibility. We have a lot of shared services, like networking, for example. And one of the really great features that I love is the cost categories. So having that bucket for shared buckets to say, okay, there's all these products, and they're all using part of the shared networking. Well, let's apportion that cost per product. Let's charge it to the right division. And having that granular visibility, and then being able to filter your perspectives by these cost categories to see, well, they spent this much on compute and databases, this much on the shared resources. So yeah, presenting that data and being able to slice and dice that data has been phenomenal. And like I said, there's just a number of all the features. I've genuinely loved it, and as Andy said, you know, I think like none of this has been possible without that, you know, continued support and partnership with Harness. Like it's been able to have that communication, the trust, working with the team to give our feedback, and then seeing our feedback and our suggestions come through. That's great. And now, you know, some of the new features that we're going to be able to leverage and always continue with the journey is amazing. Even just being here this week, coming in from London, like Harness has almost made you feel like family, and that goes a really long way in that partnership.
Well, you know, it's funny you said that, because one of the things I was going to thank you guys. You know, you've talked about, you know, our work we've done, but our product wouldn't be what it is today without the partnership that you guys have brought together. So thank you guys for constantly pushing us and constantly working with our teams and actually being a partnership. I think a lot of people will look at a customer-vendor relationship, and I think that's one of the things that you'll find, that we try to avoid that in every way, shape, or form. In fact, if that's what you're looking for, I'd say don't use Harness. If you're looking for a partnership, however, that's really what we strive for. So thank you for that, but ultimately even thank you to your teams for being that to us, right? Being that partner with it. So honestly, this is a phenomenal session. I thank you guys so much for coming up on stage. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.